Welcome, everybody. This is my first Instagram Live interview that I've ever done, so I'm really excited to have Nancy as my guest. I'm kind of doing a new series where I'm going to be speaking to animal professionals about the animals they work with and learning how we, as the general public, can help support them. So, if you guys didn't know already, today is World Elephant Day. Woo! And I'm so excited to introduce my first guest to you guys. She's someone who I've known for years, and she's one of my very favorite people in the animal world. So everybody say hello to Nancy.
Hi, everybody. This is my first one of these, too, so I have no idea what's happening.
Awesome. Great. So let's just start with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Nancy Kauffman. I'm currently the elephant manager at a zoo in North Carolina, and I've worked with elephants for 8 years, going on 9 years, I think. I'm not really good at math, so that's not really helpful. But I worked with both Asian and African elephants. When I met you in Tampa, I was working with Asian elephants, and then while I was there, I also worked with tigers and orangutans and white cheek gibbons and Asian small-clawed otters.
Literally my dream job. My dream job always growing up was to work with tigers, and so when I met you, I was like, oh my god, this girl is like the girl that I want to be. But I never made it there. But yes, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to hear your stories. Like you said, you have so much experience working with animals, and I want to get into your life a little bit more and talk about elephants in celebration of today, World Elephant Day. So, sure. Just as a little bit of background, you've already said how long you've been working with elephants, but how did you get started?
So I originally grew up in Pennsylvania, in Harrisburg area, so south central Pennsylvania. I went to school near Philadelphia. I went to Delaware Valley University. It was Delaware Valley College, so we got fancier after I left. But I studied conservation and wildlife management in the degree of animal biotechnology and conservation. So it sounds real fancy, but essentially it was real fancy. I wanted to do a lot of stuff with wildlife when I wanted to start kind of this path. Both my parents were police officers, so I wanted to kind of go in a more law enforcement route, and this degree would let me do that without being an actual law enforcement officer. It would take me more to Fish and Wildlife Commissions, looking at population counts, enforcing laws for wildlife and native wildlife. But then I went down to Busch Gardens, Tampa in 2009. I went down there, I started as a camp counselor, so they have a really cool program there where you can send your kids away to camp for a week, and we take them behind the scenes, we show them all different types of animals. I was pretty much in the Jungala area, in the tiger house, working side by side with zookeepers, teaching kids why it's important to clean, how to separate meat, how to make a perfect meatball, why it's important to have a good arm to be able to throw those meatballs across moats and things like that. And while I was there, I realized maybe I want to work in a zoo. You know, I love my experience here. So when I finished my degree, I came back down to Busch Gardens in 2010 as a camp counselor again for that summer. And then I moved over to the tours department. So I stood on the back of a truck, fed giraffes, told people why conservation is important, and you know, I worked around a lot of really cool endangered species out there, so that was always good conservation education talk. And then I got my first real animal gig, and I started working with Asian elephants. So I worked with a all-female herd of female Asian elephants, and then right before I left, about 4.5 years in, we got a male elephant, Spike, so that was my first time working with a male elephant. Went over to Jungala, worked with tigers and orangutans, and then one of the women that I worked with at Busch was the elephant manager where I'm working now, and she was like, hey, I have a keeper position open, are you interested? And I got to do a lot of cool stuff in Jungala. It was right around the time that we had the birth of a male orangutan, so I got to be a part of that, and then I had told Aaron I was ready to pick up and move north. So I moved up to North Carolina about in 2017, and have been here working with elephants, which is African elephants here, so it's a big social change from Asian and African. however long that is, since 2017. But I've been the manager. I was promoted to manager about 3 years ago now.
Oh, that's great. You know what's funny about the Busch Gardens thing is that I went to Busch Gardens Zoo Camp.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think I went there for like 2 or 3 summers because I grew up and I always wanted to be like an animal keeper, you know. So I went and I was doing making the meatballs, so everything that, and I thought that the camp counselors at Busch Gardens Zoo Camp were like the coolest people ever.
You remember Real World, the Real World series on MTV? That's basically what it was like being a camp counselor. You were shoved in a dorm and you were forced to interact with people that a lot of times you didn't like. But it was a really cool experience. But when I met you, didn't you work at Critter Castaways for a hot minute, and then you did more stuff in entertainment?
When we met, just as a backstory, when we met, I was also working with animals at Busch Gardens, but through a different company. So I was training like cats and dogs for like educational shows, and Nancy was working with the Busch Gardens Zoo team as a keeper there. So that's kind of how we met. But yeah, I remember when I was at that camp, I remember specifically my dad was like, "I'm paying money for you to go clean up animal poop." And I was like, "Yeah, Dad, please can I go?" But it was great. So I think that's awesome that that's how you started, because it is a cool way. You know, a lot of people want to know, how do you get started working with animals? And I always tell them, like, start whenever you can, volunteering or just anywhere that you can be around them, being a tour guide, being a volunteer at the zoo, you know, anything that gets you close to them and like talking to the public. But okay,
Absolutely.
I want to know, take me through a day in your life as an elephant zookeeper.
Ooh, our mornings don't start as early as they did at Busch. At Busch, it started at 6:30 in the morning, which it was still ungodly hot before the sun came up. But here we start around 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and our biggest thing is getting eyes on the elephant, seeing what they did overnight, and feeding them breakfast. We give them a bunch of hay. We'll give them a grain, which is kind of like a crackling oat bran kind of texture, I would say. But it has a lot of good nutrients in it and some really good stuff that they love. They love their grain. So we feed them a little bit, and then typically the team that I'm on now, we split up into basically 2 separate teams. So a couple keepers will stay back and we'll do some training. So whether we have a medical procedure, like we have to get blood samples taken, or if we have to do some footwork, we'll give elephants pedicures. And then sometimes we'll even do some just regular fun sessions. We'll teach them new behaviors that they don't know. Different vocalizations, those are always fun to train because they have to be making them for you to kind of capture them. Teaching them to go and get stuff and bring it back.
Like, as soon as they make a sound, you're like, "Good job."
Yes. So they all make a lot of different noises, and they're really fun if you can capture them. Teaching them to lay down, follow us around. We try and keep them as stimulated as possible. And then the other team goes and services the habitat. So we go and clean up the mess that the elephants made all night. So pick up poop. We set food for tomorrow or for them to go back out to. We'll clean drinkers. We'll do a lot of our cleaning, boring stuff, but really important stuff for the elephants. And we pick up about 6,000 pounds worth of poop a day.
Wow.
Poop, hay, anything they leave over.
I did have people... Wow. Okay, so I did have people submit questions, so I'm just going to interject because you kind of touched on a few of them, but we had one question submitted by Monica, and she wanted to know, do elephants get their toenails trimmed?
They do. So their foot kind of looks like this. There's a fat pad that they walk on, so whenever you're watching an elephant walk, they kind of expand and contract as they're going. But their toenails face down, so they grow down, and so we want to make sure that those toenails are off the ground, so they're walking on the pad of their foot. Sometimes they'll get rocks, sometimes they'll stub their toe on something, and they might get nail cracks. And sometimes it can be painful, but sometimes it's just a matter of letting the nail grow out and just kind of filing it as needed so it doesn't split anymore. And we'll trim their feet kind of like a farrier uses tools on a horse. We use the same tools. We use different knives to cut the pad. Their pad is basically a giant callus, and we just pretty much take off some of the callus parts, kind of like the thing they do when you're getting a pedicure, where they rub off all the dead skin. And then we'll file down their nails and make sure that their nails are good. Sometimes we even do cuticle care. We'll do hoof flex, which helps condition the nail. We'll give them toe grow, which helps condition the cuticle so that the nail growth is healthy. Sometimes they get foot baths if they have a really big, like a injury where they maybe stub their toe and crack that toenail pretty severely. We'll ask them to put their feet in Epsom salt, and that'll help dry out the infection, and they'll just stand there and kind of have a spa day. So a lot of times the elephants really love those because they get a lot of treats because they're participating in their own healthcare. And then, yeah, they have those healthy feet because they weigh anywhere from, our lightest elephant is just over 7,000 pounds, and our heaviest is 13,000 pounds.
That's definitely
so they put a lot of weight
on their feet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're standing for 20 hours a day for the most part.
Yeah. That's crazy. Okay, so so do you guys switch on and off? Like one day, say these 3 team members will clean the habitat, and then the next day those 3 team members will do training?
That's what we try to do. It's hard if you have a lot of new trainers because you want to give everybody the chance to grow as a keeper and get to build their individual relationships with elephants. So we do typically try to rotate as much as possible. And as you go through various programs and various trainings, the more you can kind of do. You can collect blood draw. We don't need a vet to come down to collect blood on the elephants. We can do that ourselves. We can do the foot care without having to call in a foot care professional because we're the professionals. We go to classes, we learn from mentors of kind of what that is. So we try to rotate as much as possible, but sometimes when you first start out, you're unfortunately cleaning the habitat a lot of days.
You're cleaning poop for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Been there.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens after that? Like lunchtime? Do they eat lunch or what?
They do eat lunch. So after the training, we'll try and, as we get done with training, we'll try and send them out to habitat as quickly as they get done so that they don't have to spend too much time down at the barn. We'd like to keep them out on the natural substrate of the habitats as much as possible. So we'll have them go back out to the habitat. Sometimes we'll switch up their social dynamics. So sometimes we'll have all of the girls together, or sometimes we'll have girls with some boys. There are facilities that have bachelor herds where you can have multiple boys together. And so that's kind of allows them to naturally and socially interact, especially with males, because males do go off and do their own thing, but they also enjoy that interaction, not just with females, but with males. So trying to keep up the social diversity. So they go out, and then a lot of times we're cleaning some more. Now we're cleaning the barn. We're cleaning up the mess that they made from breakfast. So any poop, any leftover hay. Sometimes we'll take those opportunities to fill Enrichment, which are basically big elephant toys that we can stuff with hay. Think of it like a Kong for your dog, where it gives them something to do. It makes it a little bit difficult. Pickle barrels, so like 55-gallon plastic barrels. Sometimes we give them little cubes that they'll have to manipulate and flip around. Donuts, tires. Tires are really fun to watch them because you get big tractor tires and then they're just pushing them around like it's nothing and they're off doing their own thing.
That's cool.
So it could range from anything. Whatever they find fun is and it's a lot. It could be a stick, fire hose. It's always big when it's an elephant, though. It's always got to be sturdy because if they step on it and they break it, that's not fun.
So speaking of that, like, can you tell us a little bit about like the elephants you work with, or like elephant personalities? Because I know they're all different. And they're just like dogs, just like any animal or human. They all have different personalities and like maybe habits that they have, funny habits or differences. They're all different. Every elephant that I've worked with has a different personality, and you'll see similarities just like you will with people, but they all have their own unique individual personality.
I've worked with a blind elephant. That's a fun personality because the way that you have to train is very different than a sighted elephant. So the relationship with him is very unique because he's putting a lot of trust in you that you're not going to put him in a very dangerous situation. But he uses his trunk like a cane. He'll guide himself to where he needs to go, make sure he's not tripping over anything. So he's fairly cautious, but he will go and interact with the females and go and mount and try and breed with them and be a normal elephant. He can't see. Young elephants are really fun because they're just so into wanting to learn. They want to know what you're doing. They want to know what the other elephants are doing. You have those elephants that will go and stir the pot, so to speak, and will start to create drama to see how it unfolds.
What kind of elephant drama goes on? Like,
they'll steal food. Sometimes they'll also interrupt courting behavior between other elephants because they want to be bred. So I've seen females like, no, it's my turn. And you're like, don't do that because he doesn't want you right now. And then she'll get pushed. And it's hilarious. It's really fun to watch because there are times where you're just like, this isn't going to go well, but they have to do it themselves and figure it out themselves. It's just like, Rosie, what are you doing? Rosie from Bush was the biggest. She wanted to always be with the boy, and sometimes the boy did not want her, and she did not pick up on that. She did not read the signs.
I've never heard that about elephants before. That they
yeah, they can be little hussies. Are we allowed to say hussies?
Little elephant hussies.
Little elephant hussies.
So, with your blind elephant, is he able to tell the difference between you and other trainers that are working with him?
Yeah, he relies on our voice a lot. So what we do see is he'll take advantage of keepers who haven't worked with him as long, and he'll see how much he can get away with, and kind of he'll use it as an excuse of, well, if I just stand here long enough, they'll come to me and then feed me, and then I'll just go a few steps, and then they'll feed me again, and then I'll go a few more steps, and they'll feed me again. And so you're just like, he knows where he's going. He's been here for 40 years. he knows he's training you right now. So it's really funny because they are so smart that if they can train you, they will train you. Absolutely. 100%. Wow.
I actually heard, I listened to another interview that you did, and you were talking about how they can feel like earthquakes, and they their feet are very sensitive, so they can detect earthquakes, and even can they hear things with their feet?
Yeah, so they communicate through infrasound a lot, so very low frequency noises. So a lot of times we'll see that their forehead is moving, their melon, if you want to call it that, is moving, and they're creating these really low rumbles, and the elephants can hear that. But then they can also pick up vibrations through their feet because remember, their foot has that fat pad. So that fat pad absorbs all this information from the ground. So, they heavily trafficked areas, they can feel railroads. I think watching an elephant respond to a train is one of the most interesting things that I've ever seen because it's a very shaky thing that happens, and they are very aware. Even before you know that the train is coming, the elephants know that a train is coming.
What is their reaction to that?
A lot of times they'll start with they'll flare their ears out. Sometimes they'll make a vocalization, and they'll kind of alert the rest of the herd. And a lot of times they'll do what's known as a protection circle. So they'll actually come around and go kind of butt to butt in a circle and all face out. And if they have calves with them, the calves will go in the middle. So they'll just be very aware of what's going on. So it is really cool to see, but at the same time you're like, oh, well, that's kind of stressful. But it's a really cool natural reaction that they have when things like that happen.
Right, because they have no idea what it is. They don't know what a train is.
Right.
They just think it's
it could be a train. It could be an earthquake.
Yeah.
It could be a giant. We don't know.
Yeah. It could be a dinosaur. They have no idea.
Yes.
Have you gotten to work with a lot of elephant calves over your career?
Unfortunately, no. I've worked, for the most part, with geriatric elephants, so older elephants. The youngest elephant that I've worked with is 18 years old. I think she was 16 when I started working with her. So she was a calf, but she was taller than her mom at that point. So it was like she wasn't that cute 250-pound, I don't have any control over my trunk kind of elephant, which is, if I get the chance to work with a baby elephant, I would be so happy. But I've gotten to go over to Lowry and see their program, Lowry Park Zoo in Tampa. They had a successful breeding program and had two babies on the ground within a couple months of each other.
Aww.
And it was really cool. It was really cool to see them interact with moms, see them interact with keeper staff, because it's a whole new world for them. They love interaction.
Yeah, that's cool. Speaking of like different programs and stuff, I know that you worked in Thailand with elephants and mahouts. Mahout. Okay. Which I think is so cool. I went to Thailand and I went to the Elephant Nature Park, which, it is kind of like, I don't know, it's a hard thing because it's a little controversial, but like, you really have to do your research and make sure you're going to like a sanctuary and not like a tourist trap where they're just mistreating and trying to make money off the animals. But like, can you tell us a little bit about what you did over there and working with your training methods and teaching them new things?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough with the zoo that I work at now. We had a partnership with several zoos in Thailand, and what the project was for was to bring positive reinforcement training and bring kind of a new understanding of what animal welfare as a whole is. Because, like you said, in Southeast Asia, elephants have been used for thousands of years, especially in Southeast Asia. They are one of the first animals really, and one of the largest animals to really be brought in, not as a farm animal, but the Huns used them as tanks, like makeshift tanks. They've been used in the logging industry. Now you're seeing them more in kind of a touristy kind of way, where you'll do elephant rides or see an elephant show or things like that, where you'll see begging elephants. Those are the things that you really that should be kind of red flags for you. Like you said, if you do your research, there are some really good programs over there that are made to help elephants and bring the conservation aspect into it and help elephants that are in need. So when we went over to Thailand, we worked with a lot of different animals. These zoos, they have a lot of animals. Chimps, gorillas, benturongs, a lot of cool different types of bears, and elephants. And so one of the things that we did was they asked me to come over to their barn to see their program and just to see what they can do better. One of their elephants, John Penn, had some bad cuticles. So they were trying to do some footwork with her and just trying to see a better way to train her so that she's not as stressed in some of these more invasive medical procedures. And so we just talked about simple training and the philosophy that at the zoos that I've worked at, and my personal philosophy is using as much positive reinforcement training as you possibly can with an animal. Give the animal a choice. If they make the choice that you want to see again, reinforce them for it. And that's what we kind of taught the mahouts over there. But it wasn't really teaching them because they already knew that concept. They were already doing parts of that in their training sessions. But it was just kind of fine-tuning it and giving them a better explanation of when they should reinforce, how they should reinforce, and why they should reinforce. And it was really cool to watch, because typically when you look at mahouts and elephant trainers, it's the same thing. It's just a different word for an elephant trainer, an elephant keeper. It's a more traditional name. A lot of mahouts live in a family unit. So the group that I worked with, they were all related. It was males who were all related. The leader of the mahouts, he was the uncle of the family. And his nephews, his sons, were all kind of working with him. Brothers were working with him. So it's interesting when you go over and you start talking to these people, because they are a family unit, which makes them great for elephants, because elephants are a family unit, right?
Right.
But it's really the training and the philosophy behind it. So if you look at, this is going to get really complicated, and tell me if I'm going way too off topic.
Okay.
So, when you have a lot of turnover here, if we have a new keeper, we have to spend months training them how to properly interact with an elephant, how to be safe around elephants, how to work doors, what's the layout of the barn and everything like that. Same thing happens when a mahout leaves, but a lot of times in the more traditional sense, there's a lot of force, there's a lot of domination that has to be used to basically explain to the elephant that they're not in charge of the situation, that they need to listen to the mahouts. So a lot of turnover can cause a lot of problems. But if you have family units that work with the elephants for several years, that work with the elephants since the elephants were babies, you don't see as much heavy-handedness with that style. But where you see a lot of problems is when there's a lot of turnover and it has to be reestablished of who's in charge, who's dominant, and it's for safety. If an elephant who's 8,000 pounds walks to the left and you're standing on their left, you can die. So you need to make sure that the elephant understands that this is my bubble. I don't want you to enter my bubble, but I can enter your bubble because I need to take care of you. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of technicalities with that. So when I went over there, we were working free contact with the elephant. So we were directly sharing space with the elephant. And one of the things I asked them is there a place where you don't have to be in with them, where the elephants can have their own space? And so they created a chute and an area for the elephant so that the trainers weren't in there with them. And then I taught them simple things, just how to get an elephant to move towards you if you're not in with them. So rather than forcing them to come over or pulling them over with a guide or an Incus or a bullhook, comes in many different names, but it's a tool that kind of looks like a fire poker that's used to move the elephant where you need them to go. Typically they use it on pressure points and things like that. So teaching them, okay, if I want this elephant to come to me, I'm going to give her something that she likes to move towards. Mm-hmm. So we actually used a very colorful soccer ball, and on a stick, and we made a target pole. So we gave her an objective that wasn't anything like the Incus, and we trained it in a different way so that she knew to move over to it, to come over to it. So it was teaching those small things. It wasn't going to stop what they were doing. It wasn't going to change the way they were going as a unit, but it was those small changes that they need to see that there is a different way to do the same task that makes it more comfortable for the elephant.
Right. And would you say that, because some dogs are very food motivated and some dogs are very toy or reward, affection oriented? Are elephants the same way?
Oh, absolutely. Every animal is like that too. It's the only thing that you can find, the only thing that's reinforcing to an animal is what the animal finds reinforcing. So if you have a gluten intolerance and I come and give you a bunch of cupcakes that have a bunch of gluten in it and say, great job, that's not reinforcing for you. So it's the same thing with elephants. They all have preferences. They all have different food preferences. Touch is one of those things that they will touch each other in different ways, ears, mouth, back, things like that. But it doesn't mean the same way, the same thing that we would associate it with. So, but we train them to make it a positive thing. So they know if I'm touching their side that, oh, this feels good. Here's a bunch of food.
Mm-hmm. Is it true that elephants hug each other to say hello? Because I saw a lot of pictures of that online.
They do a lot of trunk interlocked things. They'll do a lot of touching of the faces. Mm-hmm. More dominant elephants will sometimes stick their trunk into other elephants' mouths to steal their food. So sometimes it's a dominant and submissive kind of thing. Sometimes it is an affection thing. Especially with with moms and calves, you'll see moms kind of wrap their trunk around a calf and protect it and do similar things that we would with a child. Do they mean the same thing? I couldn't tell you with 100% certainty that yes, they do. Because I don't speak elephant as much.
Do they also? Yeah, I totally like. But in your experience, like, so those affections that they show other elephants, have they also been known to show like you guys, humans?
Absolutely. They have preferences for people. Some people, if you're around, sometimes they choose to come to you instead of go to a trainer who's calling them because you're so reinforcing to them. Our goal, I think, is to be the most reinforcing thing in a barn that we work at. So if you can get all the elephants to choose you over somebody else, inside it's kind of a win.
So it's like this,
but in reality, that's
going on between you guys.
Yeah.
Are you any of the
She
elephants?
likes me more.
Yeah. So how many elephants are you the favorite of right now? Would you say?
2. But I see that a couple people are on here that will probably not agree with me. But I will say 2.
Okay. Noted.
I feel like
I was going to ask you too. In terms of like rewarding them, like, so food wise, what would you say is the highest, like, most delectable food that an elephant would want to eat? Generally.
Ooh.
And another question to that, this was submitted by my friends. She has a 5-year-old daughter, and she wanted to know, do elephants really actually like peanuts as much as they portray in the cartoons?
That one is a lot easier to answer, so I'm going to answer that one first.
Okay.
Not all elephants like peanuts. All the Asian elephants that I worked with at Busch Gardens hated peanuts. They were like, no thank you. I have found a bag of peanuts that a guest has thrown into the elephant habitat that the elephants did not touch because they did not like it. Okay. They've also handed them back, like, no thank you. You can take that. Give me something else. I think the most fun things that we've given the elephants, and this was at Busch, Peeps, red licorice, Peeps, yeah, they're like the little marshmallow Peeps. Red licorice is always fun because if you put it on bamboo, we had one elephant, Karina, that would just spend hours just picking off every little bit and ate it. That was her favorite thing in the world. Watermelon, I think, is one of those things where you're like, yeah, this is going to be delicious. And most elephants, I would say 9 out of 10 elephants are like, yeah, watermelon, great. The really juicy stuff, I think they love. Honeydew melons, watermelon. Grapes are always fun too because they'll pick them up individually.
That's really fun to watch. But I've never seen an elephant pick up something really tiny.
Yeah, they can pick up something as small as a Skittle. I've seen them pick up Skittles before because, why not give an elephant some Skittles? Yeah, a Skittle. Little tiny Skittle.
Wow.
One at a time. I've watched an elephant.
This because you watched an elephant do what?
I've watched an elephant step on a Skittle and we're like, oh no, and she picked up her foot, scraped the Skittle off her foot and was like, yummy. Like,
oh my god. That's
disgusting, but also awesome.
That's crazy too because they're so big that what is really their visual awareness? Like, I wouldn't even really think that they could see their feet. Can they see their feet? Not great.
It's kind of like us. If you're just sitting here and you look straight down, you can't see the tips of your toes. You can't really see past your chin. Same thing with elephants. Their eyes are still set up pretty far, even though it kind of is almost like they're looking down. Their eyes are still set up really high where if it's underneath their mouth, they have to physically back up and like lower their head and look at it. So when she stepped on the Skittle, it was actually the sensation of her stepping on the Skittle from her foot, from that fat pad that she was like, oh, hey, this is it. Their eyesight is not great. They don't see in color. They don't have great depth perception either because of how far set their eyes are. They don't have the same crossover that we do. So their depth perception isn't typically great. So if they come up to a ditch or a wallow, a lot of times they'll kind of feel around with their trunk rather than just keep going into it, they kind of test it first. Most of the time, I will say.
Cool. Okay, I have a couple other things I want to touch on, just so you know. I do want to talk about a little bit about conservation and their threats in the wild, but before we move away from like your experience with them every day, I did have a couple of people ask, and I would also like to know, but can you share your most memorable day that you've had as an elephant keeper, or like maybe a really funny story that you remember or something like that?
Oh, a funny story is realizing that elephants lose their teeth. And the way that I found that out was finding a giant elephant tooth on the habitat, like my third day ever working with elephants. They have molars in the back of their mouth. They have 4 molars. They're like the size of a brick. They weigh anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds. And they will grow from back to front. So they kind of go in a conveyor belt sort of way. And one of the elephants had lost a tooth. And so I'm just raking the habitat, living my best life. I'm an elephant keeper. This is great. I love sweating. And I looked down and I panicked because I find this thing. I didn't really know what their teeth looked like. I know that we had them, but I didn't know kind of the ins and outs of it. A lot of zookeeping is learning on the job. So I really didn't know that much about elephants when I started working with them. And so I went to my supervisor, who is cleaning the habitat with me, and I'm like, Diane, this is how. She goes, it's fine. That's supposed to happen. We knew that she was probably going to lose a tooth. Happy you found it. Get back to work.
I just imagine you like running around the habitat holding this giant like brick tooth. Like, what do I do with this?
Yeah, and then I was like, do I put it back? Do we take it back with us? What do I just drop it?
What do you do with it?
What do I do with my hand?
Yeah, like what do you
A lot of times we'll save them and we'll use them as education tools. So we'll take cool. So that, you know, if people find elephant teeth while they're out walking around, they know what they are, and it's okay that, you know, there's an elephant tooth, I guess. But we'll talk to people because you only see like that much of their tooth from their gum line, and the entire tooth is like the size of half my head. It goes all the way into their gums, and it's pretty massive. It's really impressive.
That's really cool because it's one of those things it's cool because I never thought about elephant having teeth either. Like, when you really think about it, you're like, yeah, of course they do. They eat things, but you just see their trunk, and you're like, that's probably it.
That's all that works. Yeah, trying to get kids to understand that they don't suck water into their trunk because it would make their noses hurt is probably the most fun conversations that you have. They use their trunk like a cup. They'll suck water into it, and then they'll blow it into their mouth. But cartoons and stuff, they're like, elephants just eat through their trunk. And then they talk through their mouth. So.
Yeah. So actually, my friend that asked that question, Kate, she just joined. Hi, Kate. I'm glad you made it. She's got little babies, too, at home. But, yeah, so if you can think of a memorable moment, that would be great. But if not, her second question was, what made you choose to work with elephants over other animals?
I applied for the job and I got it.
Either one of those questions.
So thank you. Hey, Kate. So I got the job just because I applied for the position. I did not think that I would ever be qualified to work with elephants, but I had applied for several positions and gotten turned down several times for positions that I thought that I was more qualified for, and I was like, you know what? What's there to lose? And a job is a job, so let me apply for elephants. And I got it. And I was like, this is terrifying. So I was a camp counselor, so I was working a lot with tigers and orangutans and like, okay, like big cats, that's cool. And then they're like, cool, you got elephants. And I was like, great. I don't know if I can handle this because they're massive. I don't really know anything about them, and this is terrifying. But the team that I worked for was great and taught me a lot, and, you know, I wouldn't be where I am or have found my passion for elephants without that one moment of just, let's see what happens. You know, and after I got the position, you know, I saw, you know, these big, powerful animals that are giant goofballs, that are so fun to work with. And really, you kind of get two people. You either get really passionate elephant people that are elephant all the way, and then you get people who are kind of like, this is a lot of heavy lifting, and I can't handle this. And you'll find that with a lot of different species, but especially elephant people. I think you either have elephant people and non-elephant people. It's very separate, because if you're in elephants, you're in it all the way, and you'll probably stay with elephants as long as you possibly can.
Hold on. I got a dog situation. No, guys. No.
You could try and give them the peeps. Try the peep thing.
The elephants or
the red. Your dogs. They like peeps, right? I don't know anything.
I would have known that, because there was one year my mom literally for Easter sent me 50 packages of peeps. And I was like, Mom, I can't possibly eat all these. I would have donated them to Busch Gardens to give to the elephants. So, Mom, if you're watching now, you know what to do with your peeps every Easter from now on.
There you go.
And speaking about heavy lifting, this is my last question before we get really quickly into elephants in the wild and all that. But my favorite question, I did tease it on my Instagram earlier, but my friend who has a 3-year-old son asked, how big is elephant poop?
That is a great question. And I don't think people realize how big elephant poop is. It's massive. It's as big as my head. And that's just one, they're called boluses. I don't know why they call them boluses, but an elephant bolus is one whole poop. And then they will probably drop 6 or 7 of those. So they could lose about 100 pounds in one poop. It's massive.
Oh my gosh!
And depending
one
on
poop could be 100 pounds.
One pile, some elephants poop a lot. They poop usually about every 2 hours or so, but sometimes they poop a lot because they eat a lot. They eat over 200 pounds of food a day, and a lot of that is vegetation and hay and a lot of stuff that keeps you regular. Wendy, you know me so well. I can't ever get through an interview where I don't talk about poop.
Do you talk about elephant poop a lot?
Yes. In almost any interview that I do with about elephants, it always comes down to poop at some point. I took an interviewer and just had him pick up poop one time, with his hands, and we explored it together. I think I've picked up poop for Wendy. Fresh, almost fresh. The elephants had just pooped. We moved them to a different location. I grabbed the poop and brought it over to her and the other gentleman, Steve, who was doing an interview with me. And I was like, "Here's some fresh poop." And he's like,
"I bet you didn't expect this at our interview."
Yeah. Well, and he had sometimes we actually take their poop and it's not fossilizing it, but you essentially clear coat it and just make it a giant crop. So it doesn't smell anymore. It's usually super dried out, but it still looks like that full bolus. So Steve had that prop, but I brought him fresh poop because it's more fun with fresh poop because then you can play in it and see look at all the hay they ate. Oh, here are some grapes. Oh, here's that thing that they didn't digest because their digestive system is really inefficient. They only digest about 60% of what they eat. So
you guys should
sell those.
You guys should sell those at the gift shop. Do you guys do that?
I don't. There are some zoos that sell Zoo-Doo. They do. They actually sell the compost and the animal poop. They sell it as compost. Zoo Miami does that. So if you want some really good organic material to start a home garden, find a zoo and see if they do Zoo-Doo because your garden will be beautiful.
That's awesome.
Sticker from the apple, yeah. Rhea worked with me at Busch in the education department. You do find stickers sometimes from apples because it goes right through. There's no point in pulling off a bajillion stickers on the bajillion apples that you feed them in a day.
Yeah. That's a really good tip though for gardening. I never thought about that. Ask your local zoo for poop.
Yep. Some zoos do it, some zoos don't, but you don't know until you ask.
Don't know until you ask. Well, this question turned into a very educational little segment about poop and its uses. So thank you. So before we wrap up, I want to just quickly touch on, just like a little bit of elephant conservation, which is, obviously a really important thing, and why you're, working at a zoo, and just like threats in the wild, how people can help, what are their main dangers that they face, et cetera, et cetera.
Humans are the main danger that elephants face. We are making their habitats very fragmented. We take away forests, we take away the grasslands, we take away those areas from them, and so that then forces them to move into residential areas. They can eat an entire village's food supply in one night. Herds can, especially African elephants, can be anywhere from 10 elephants to 30 to 40 to 50. I think some of them even up in the 70s to hundreds. And that can do a lot of damage, because if your entire year's food supply is wiped out in one night, how do you eat? So in Africa in particular, there's human-elephant conflict in both Southeast Asia and Africa, but it's a little bit different in each place. So in Africa in particular, you have the deforestation, you have the fragmented habitats, where now they're becoming a nuisance species. So governments are trying to figure out, okay, how do we keep our people safe and their livelihood good? And unfortunately, you do see mass euthanization. They will cull elephants if there are too many for the area. The IUNC, which kind of dictates what animals are endangered, what animals are threatened, what animals are overly populated and are doing just fine, actually finally came out and said, no, African elephants are an endangered species. They are no longer threatened, because they weren't weren't able to find accurate counts of what elephants were where. The zoo that I work for now actually does a collaring program. They track elephants in the wild by using collars. Shows the migration paths, gives us a good idea of where they naturally want to go. So don't build there. That's all information that's super important as we're realizing that the human population continues to grow, but a lot of the animal populations, unfortunately, are not able to, because it's encroaching on people's space. I mean, we see it in America too, with black bears and deer and things like that, where especially with bears and wolves and coyotes and things like that, they're looking for sources of food, because where they used to get their food no longer exists, because now there's a housing development. The housing development's there, but now there are trash cans. So trash cans also provide me with food. Well, now you're a nuisance bear and you have to leave. That's basically crazy. What's happening in Africa.
That's crazy, because even here, I live in Los Angeles, but there's so many, specifically like in Burbank, they have mountain lions that come down into the neighborhoods. We have coyotes like literally right in front of my door, because they live in the hills, but our neighborhoods are built in the hills. So yeah, it's like we are building on their home and they have nowhere to go. Now, would you say that is more of a threat than like the ivory trade and poaching?
I would say it's a little bit of both, because the ivory trade is very big in Africa. African elephants, both your females and male African elephants, are going to have big tusks. They're going to have visible tusks. So that tusk is just a tooth. It's a modified incisor, but it's pretty. So we want to make jewelry out of it, or we want to make trinkets, or we want to do this, or we want to do that with it. The ivory trade is a huge problem. It's a huge problem. And that's one of the things that people can do right from their home. The pandemic, a lot of people have been online shopping. You're online shopping a lot. Research what you're buying. If it has ivory in it, don't buy it. An elephant needs the ivory. There's actually a really great nut. It's called a tagua nut. I think it's from South America. And if Wendy, if you're still on here, if you know the specifics on the tagua nut, give it a shout out. But it's a really hard nut that they can carve, and they can turn into a beautiful trinket, and it looks exactly like ivory. It looks exactly like ivory. But it doesn't injure an elephant. It comes naturally from a tree. They can harvest it just like any other nut. And now you have a beautiful trinket, and you know, an elephant is safe from that. Elephant skin is another big thing that's starting to, and this is going to be a little weird, has been another thing that poachers have started to harvest, because they'll turn it into beads for jewelry. So really, whenever you go anywhere, whenever you buy anything, know what you're buying. Figure out, okay, what these things are beautiful, and it obviously took a lot of craftsmanship, but how was it made? Where did you get this from? Where did you get these materials from? And if they came from, you know, an unsustainable place or you know, from different animals, know that. You know, do your research, because Jane Goodall has a really great saying for illegal animal trade and different things, and it's once the buying stops, the killing can too. Once we stop buying these things, the market is no longer there for people to want to poach animals for, whether it's, you know, furs or tucks or things like that. So that's the biggest thing, is that the ivory trade is still running rampant, and it is still very much so a big thing.
Yeah, that's I had never heard about that nut, so that's new information for me. Thank you for sharing that. But it is true. It's like, you know, I feel like a lot of people think, well, I'm just one person, so if I don't buy this thing, it's not going to make a difference. They're not going to know why I didn't buy it. But it's just one of those things where, like, every drip into the pot of water, eventually it will fill up and it'll overflow, and it can be a movement. So I think that is really important. I try to be really conscious about what I'm buying and where I'm buying them from, but it is true. A lot of people just say, oh, that's pretty, I want it, and then buy it. And we're not helping. So yeah, let's everybody try to be a little more conscious about our shopping. And I think to wrap up, unless you actually have one last question. This is my last question. Okay.
Because I mean, there's a whole different side to Asian elephants if you want to talk about them in contribution too. So you just let me know.
I know. Maybe another time we'll do like specific. There's so much information about everything. Like I could probably honestly talk to you for a whole day about elephants, but it would just be way too long. So we might have.
Well, and Wendy did write back here about the togwa nuts. So togwa nuts are from South America. It is called the elephant safe ivory. Looks and feels exactly like ivory. Plus, it's a way to support the farmer of the nuts, the artists, and the vendors. So that's awesome. Wendy is a great educator that I used to work with, and she knows a lot of cool things. So thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm really interested in this. I want to go. I'll probably do a lot of research after this because, like I said, I had never heard of it. So, you know, that's one of the reasons why I want to start doing these. Is because if I've never heard about it, there's hundreds of thousands of people that have never heard about it ever. So, the more people that know about ways to help, the better. And I hope anyone that is watching this live or will be watching it later, take all of your new knowledge and go sprinkle it around to everyone that you know. Use it for fun facts at a party. Use it for an icebreaker. Be like, hey, did you know that there's this nut that's almost exactly like ivory? So yeah, we can all work together to help save these species. But Nancy, one last thing. Okay, if you were talking to somebody who didn't know anything about elephants, literally nothing aside from what they look like, what is one thing that you would want them to remember about these beautiful creatures?
I'm going to cheat, and I'm just going to make a list, and you just tell me when we've run out of time and I need to stop talking. Okay. They're so smart. They're so gentle. They are so quick at learning. They care for each other so amazingly. They're where the myth of the Cyclops came from. That's a fun fact. That's always great at parties. Because of their sinuses, where their trunk is, their sinuses, just like our skull, we have the cartilage in there that is our sinuses. Their sinuses are huge. So when archaeologists started finding elephant skulls, they were like, what is this giant one-eyed thing? And then they finally realized the eyes are on the side. So cool. That's always a fun thing, especially with kids. But just the smart, they're gentle, they are incredible animals, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity to work with them, and work for them. Essentially, that's what we do. Is we are slaves to the animals that we work for, because our job is to make sure that they are safe and they are comfortable and they are getting everything they need. They're great animals. And they're goofy, too. They look very stoic, but if you've ever seen an elephant run, they kind of look like a cow. Like, you know how cows are not meant to run, but horses are, so they're very majestic. Elephants are basically cows, where they just, like, are herky-jerky as they run around, which is always
not
adorable.
Majestic. Noted.
Not majestic.
Okay.
But majestic in many other ways.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up now, finally. Like I said, I could talk to you all day, Nancy. You are so knowledgeable, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And everybody else, thank you for tuning in and celebrating World Elephant Day with us. If you guys want to know more about the whole World Elephant campaign, you can keep up with them. They actually have an Instagram. It's at World Elephant Day, or worldelephantday.org. And if you have the means, please consider donating to them. They're a great organization. You can find their link on their Instagram page, and they have a PayPal. So make sure you check them out. And like I said, thank you for joining us. You guys being here and listening to this interview means that you care about elephants just as much as we do, and just as much as everyone else. So this interview will be saved on my Instagram page. So please share it with your family and friends. It'll be there forever, hopefully.
Hopefully I didn't sound too stupid.
Huh? You sound great.
It's always nerve-wracking whenever you do an interview with someone that you know, because you're like, I want to make sure that I'm giving you all of the facts, because if I'm never going to see you again, that's one thing where you're like, it'll be fine. Somebody will correct him eventually. But like, if I watch this back over and I'm like, ooh, yeah, no, I need to text her and let her know that is not.
I'd be like,
that
Nancy,
was not the correct information.
Why
Why did you lie to me?
Right. No, but thank you, Nancy, for sharing your time. And also, I know we have a couple people on here that are interested in working with animals, so hopefully it's okay if they message you any questions that they have.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Sometimes I do go down a TikTok black hole, so if you realize that I have not answered you, it's because I've seen it, but I'm also on TikTok, so I will reply when I get out of my 4-hour-long TikTok black hole.
Gotcha. Noted. Cool. Okay, Nancy, thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. It was great talking to you.
Bye.